Thanks to all of you for joining me here today. You may be familiar with some of my courses with Pluralsight, which cover project management and business analysis, but today I want to have a conversation with you about a topic that applies to organizations of almost any size and type: the need for better alignment between business and IT strategies. If your organization is anything like the ones that I've worked with or seen in the past, your team members are, by and large, excellent sources of information and knowledge with a great number of talents and skills. However, this knowledge isn't necessarily in alignment with the contributions that they make or that they're asked to make within the organization. Their job may have them focusing on tasks that don't really optimize their talents. Further, these contributions may not be entirely in line with the priorities of their team or department due to the way that responsibilities are either allocated or explained to those team members. There may be overlapping work or work that's out of scope in many of these instances. Looking beyond that team or department level, we also often find that activities being conducted by these teams are also not fully aligned with the highest level strategic objectives and goals for the organization. In order for us to do our best and most meaningful work, we have to work to align these four elements. Our team members' knowledge should be effectively leveraged in creating their contributions. These contributions should align properly with their team's priorities. And the work conducted by these teams should be completely in service to the broader goals and objectives that define why we do any of this in the first place. One of the key areas of friction, however, that prevents us from achieving this kind of ideal alignment is the chasm that exists between technical and non-technical members of many organizations. On the one side, we have roles like developers, data pros, and IT ops. On the other, there are roles like sales, marketing, and management. Thankfully, in some organizations, the lines between these roles are starting to blur, which gives everyone a greater understanding of the business as a whole. However, too often, we still see that there's this stark divide that exists between those that build and maintain the tools of the organization and those that use them. And this divide is what leads to friction and misunderstandings. On the one side, technical workers might often complain that their business colleagues lack technical acumen, making it difficult to communicate with them about important issues. They may complain that the business side of the organization doesn't provide sufficient resources for them to do their jobs effectively and to provide the services that have been requested of them. They might complain that their business colleagues expect solutions on an unreasonable basis and don't understand when they might be asking for something that's easy to implement and when they might be asking for something that's almost impossible. And finally, they may complain that business professionals resist change, creating undue stress and acrimony when necessary updates or changes are pushed out. On the other hand, the business side of the organization might accuse IT of not understanding corporate strategy and failing to relate to the business's underlying needs. They might be frustrated that they feel like they're constantly fighting against tools and processes that don't allow them to effectively complete their work. They may feel like IT communicate insufficiently or poorly, either not sharing enough detail at all or using technical language that they don't understand. And they may believe that IT often makes changes that upset norms, fiddling with processes and platforms that seemed to work just fine yesterday and didn't really need to be modified. In order to overcome this friction, it's important to first recognize the essential symbiotic relationship that exists between the technical and business factions of the organization. IT without a purpose is useless, simply a set of tools in need of a mission. At the same time, without tools, the business would be powerless and unable to achieve its goals. One cannot succeed without the other, and so it's imperative that we find common ground and ways to collaborate with one another. This process starts by asking a few questions about those we work with in the organization. First, what is the mindset of our peers? And also, what informs their points of view? What drives their priorities? Perhaps someone from the business unit has had a bad experience working with someone else in IT in the past, and that's colored the way that they interact with the department now. Perhaps they feel like no one's listening or that they don't know how to communicate a need that they are experiencing in a way that will be properly understood. They may have a piece of knowledge that you don't, or they might be missing a critical part of the picture. They may have more experience in the organization, or they might be a new hire unfamiliar with organizational processes. Perhaps they're a key decision maker in the organization or very clearly understand the political dynamics of how decisions are currently made. Whatever the case might be, it's likely that understanding where the person you're speaking with is coming from and how their perspective has been shaped can help you to understand how to communicate with them more effectively. After taking some time to assess the important background dynamics of others we might be working with, we should also take a moment for an introspective look at ourselves as well. First, what do we not know? Borrowing from the idea of known unknowns and unknown unknowns, we won't be able to fully answer this question, of course. But in most business contexts, what you know you don't know holds a lot of the potential value that's needed for better decision making, especially if you continue to reassess your knowledge and ask this question continuously as conversations with others take place and work progresses. Someone working on the technical side of the organization might very fairly not have any idea that there's a major new sales contract that rests on certain capabilities being put in place on a certain timetable. At the same time, someone on the business side might not have heard about a critical vulnerability that was recently discovered in a key tool that's going to require some extended downtime to fix and might have some impact on our customers. When we take a moment to think and listen, it can often become clear when a big puzzle piece is missing from our understanding and give us a lead for what sort of different threads we might need to chase down in order to further our knowledge. Second, what biases do we bring with us to the conversation? Perhaps you have a strong personal preference toward a particular platform or technology. For me, that'd be iOS and using a Mac. However, you shouldn't let that sort of personal preference alone influence your opinion about whether something else might objectively be a better fit for the organization's needs. Finally, what limits our receptiveness to ideas? This includes both ideas that might come from others as well as those that we might have ourselves. Oftentimes, we can be so locked into our mindset and worldview that we're just simply incapable of thinking about a simple and elegant solution that might seem obvious to someone with less knowledge about the situation. In many cases, the experts might have already correctly rejected that sort of idea based on factors that they better understand. But in other cases, someone with deep knowledge of a subject simply isn't able to see the forest for the trees. Taking the time to objectively assess ideas and to either accept or reject them for specific stated reasons can help you to make sure that you don't miss out on ideas that you might otherwise have simply rejected out of hand without much thought. After we take some time to think about where others might be coming from and to consider what might influence our own mindset and opinion, it's worthwhile to take a moment to ask how we can better collaborate given those revelations. First, how can we listen more empathetically to others? By taking time to consider their opinions and perspectives, and most importantly, what drives those opinions and perspectives, we can put ourselves in a position to better understand what they're trying to communicate with us. Similarly, understanding the context surrounding others as well as the foundations of our own perspective can help us to share our insights better. The whole concept of meeting others halfway doesn't entail simply understanding and fully adopting their perspective. Rather, it's about using that knowledge in order to shape and better convey our own perspectives to them, as they hopefully attempt to put in the same effort. This leads us to the third question, which is what can we best learn together? After considering how perspectives and individual knowledge may vary, you'll likely arrive at a juncture where it's clear neither the business nor technical faction in your organization has all of the answers, and that exploring these questions together is the best way that we can ensure common understanding and the right move forward. This is where you want to end up, at a place where learning and decision-making are integrated, considering the internal and external, the technical and the non-technical, all of these different perspectives on an equal footing, so that we can arrive at a place where we can work together most effectively toward the goals that we share with one another. While the thought process that these questions allow can be helpful regardless of which side of this divide you might consider yourself to be on, there are some additional steps that we can take to better work together, some that apply specifically to business professionals, some more to technical professionals, and some to everyone. For those of you who consider yourself to be on the business side of this divide, one area of focus should be on defining needs clearly so that they can be systemized in an effective manner. You need to be able to not only describe what you're trying to do or what you want to do or what might be standing in your way of success right now, but also why that challenge exists or why you want that feature. It could be that a feature already exists that would allow you to accomplish your goal, but it just works in a little bit of a different way than you might have expected. And so maybe you were never able to find it on your own. On the other hand, what you might think sounds like an easy fix might be next to impossible, or vice versa. One small change from your perspective might also result in serious upheaval for some other user in the organization. And without a full and clear understanding of how all of these different technical systems and infrastructure interrelate, it would be impossible for us to assess that. That's why we need to be able to rely on our relationship with the technical professionals in our organizations who would have these sorts of answers. In many organizations, a business analyst can be really helpful in this regard. BAs specialize in eliciting needs and converting that information into useful, actionable requirements. However, if you don't have a BA that you work with on a regular basis, or if the scope of the situation doesn't merit bringing together a formalized approach, it's a pretty small problem you're trying to deal with, you can still take on a business analyst's mentality for yourself. Drill down below the surface level desire that you might have expressed in order to discover what that true underlying need might be. Think about the scope of what you might be asking for, or the various ways or circumstances that a similar need might arise for someone else in the organization. Provide whatever descriptive information you can in order to help make your point, and then confirm that your technical colleagues that you work with really understand the heart of your request and that you haven't misspoken or communicated with them in a way that they misunderstood. You might think rather that being able to automatically generate a certain type of report would make your life a lot easier, as one example. But are there other related reports that might also provide benefit to you or others in the organization? How often would you like these to be generated? And what's the shelf life for the data that you might be using to make those reports? Where does that data need to come from? This kind of context can be really invaluable to ensuring that your needs are well understood, that a solution can be built that's consistently helpful, and that we don't waste the time of our technical teams working on one-off solutions that instead would have been better spent working on something that was a bigger idea, something more comprehensive that can help more people in the organization. Next up, it's up to you to empower your IT colleagues by setting realistic goals. Be understanding of the constraints that they face, receptive to learning more about the technical challenges that might stand between both of you and the solutions that you might be requesting, and an advocate for your technical colleagues so that they have the resources they need to help you succeed. There's really no room for an I don't care how, just get it done type of mentality that ignores the reality and damages the relationship between you, the tool user, and them, the tool maker or tool shop in this case. Don't simply assume what level of complexity might be involved in a request that you make. Instead, ask for the expert opinion of your colleagues who will be responsible for fulfilling that request and determine what you can do to help expedite their progress. Help them to help you. This leads into the next point, which is to provide adequate resources to develop and execute IT plans. Now, this might not be something that's directly under your control, and if not, that's okay. You can still serve as a champion and advocate for the tech team, taking the time to understand what would better help them to help you, and communicating that to those who do have the direct authority to make sure the necessary resources are put in place. It's up to each of us individually to help to bridge this divide, as well as to lead the effort to generate support for solutions and to help generate buy-in from other users for new initiatives. You can help to fight against the resistance that changes often bring if you gain an understanding of why those changes are happening and why they might be important in the first place. You may well have much more authority and credibility to your business colleagues than anyone from the outside, like staff from IT, especially if you still work in an organization where these two factions are very divided. Use that power for good. Be the link between your colleagues and your other colleagues, as it were, from the technical side of the organization. Be that link and help to bring these two factions together. Of course, the business unit staff aren't the only ones with responsibility here. Technical staff should also keep a number of key points in mind. First, knowing more than your users comes with some responsibilities. Never assume that those with less technical knowledge aren't capable of understanding or are unworthy of information about how the tools they rely on might be used or how they might change over time. Engage your business colleagues. Communicate to them in terms that they can understand and relate to. Teach when the opportunity arises without leading them too deeply into the technical weeds for them to follow. And don't take advantage of the information asymmetry that might exist between you and them. It might be tempting to throw some technical lingo at a member of the business team if they ask questions you really don't want to deal with or acknowledge right now, and to try and assert that you surely know better than they do. But remember what we discussed a few minutes ago. Sometimes the best ideas can come from those on the outside, whose perspectives aren't biased by being too locked into a certain way of thinking. Remember, they have a different perspective and they see the challenges of the organization from a different viewpoint than you do in the work that they might be doing on the internal operations of the business, working with customers, and so forth. Don't grow impatient with business team members who might use terminology incorrectly or provide insufficient detail. Instead, work with them to try and understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to convey, especially if they lack the technical means to express it the same way that you would. Oftentimes, if they are using technical language or trying to communicate with you in that regard, it's because they're trying to meet you halfway. And so we need to kind of accept this open hand of friendship and work with them to understand what their perspective might be. I think a lot recently about the FaceTime vulnerability issue that popped up a couple months ago now for iOS and predominantly on the iPhone and iPad, where a teenager discovered that it was possible to listen into others' phones without their knowledge or consent by taking advantage of this strange bug in how users are added to a group FaceTime call. This was a case where the kid and his mom did their best to try and communicate this problem to Apple in the way that they understood by calling them. They picked up the phone and called Apple support, but they were turned away by the support team they talked to, who kind of unhelpfully instructed them to file a radar, which is something that would be totally a foreign language to anyone who doesn't have a history in app development on Apple platforms and understands that that's the terminology used for essentially a help ticket or a support ticket that you would submit through the Apple Developer Portal. Be an example in your organization. Don't get so locked into policy and procedure that you carelessly tell your business colleagues to simply file a ticket or file a radar and fill out a support form when they try and alert you to an issue like this. And definitely don't assume that the user must be incorrect or flat out wrong in the way that they describe a challenge they're facing or an issue they've discovered. I think that's one of the reasons why the FaceTime bug probably didn't make it up the escalation chain very quickly, is because it sounded kind of absurd. And I'm sure to that frontline support staffer, they thought there's no way that that could possibly be how it is. It's got to be an issue, some sort of user error that's occurring here. By making the extra effort to listen and understand when working with our business colleagues, and to use that knowledge that you have that your users and business colleagues might not, you might just help to avert a serious disaster down the line. Next, remember that if your business colleagues are the ones who use your tools, that makes you the hardware store in this equation. It might be easier for you to just provide them with hammers than it would be to give them screwdrivers, but that doesn't mean that the tool will fit the job. Similarly, when several potential solutions might fit the bill, there may be one that best fits your preferences, but another that's clearly better for the organization overall. You might want to propose a solution that's exceedingly expensive because it makes your job easier. But is it really a better fit for the organization than a more economical solution that requires more effort on your part, especially if cost is a major priority for the organization right now? Maybe. Maybe the amount saved in IT effort far exceeds the extra cost of the platform, but be honest about it and make that case if so. Similarly, you might not want to shift over to a new solution because the migration will be stressful or because you're unfamiliar with the system. But will it better serve the future growth of your organization than your current system? Today's strategic debt becomes tomorrow's technical debt. The best way to avoid it entirely is to consistently align your decision-making and feedback to the organization's goals rather than simply to what's best for your small part of the world today. Next, deliver reliably on the basics in order to help ensure your credibility. Just like in sports, a lack of focus on the fundamentals leads to poor results, even if you're capable of making that really incredible play. If your colleagues are consistently hamstrung by email outages, hard to understand documentation, poorly designed processes, and tools that just aren't well suited for their job, why objectively should they believe you when you provide your input on important decisions? The sales team isn't likely to cling to every word that their worst performer says, and marketing isn't going to give any extra weight to someone who doesn't even understand what markets your company serves. It may be that vendors are at fault, that issues were beyond your control, or even that members of the business team are the reason some troubles emerged in the first place. But if you can't prevent these issues, at least communicate clearly why they happened and what can help to prevent them in the future. Otherwise, your credibility may well be shot. Handling the small stuff means that your business colleagues will trust you when you tell them that a decision that looks good on a sales sheet would be a disaster to implement and can be priceless when, despite everyone's best efforts, a communications gap still exists because you simply know more about a technical topic than they do. In those situations, whether they take a leap of faith depends on whether they find your word credible and your results to be reliable. Another way to build credibility with your business colleagues is to demonstrate strategic thinking to them. You might be convinced that a new service or software deployment would greatly improve your company's technical workflow. But what does that mean to them? If your current system can handle 1,000 requests per second and a new one can handle 10,000 requests a second, you could perhaps frame this instead as being able to serve 10 times more customers or serve them 10 times as quickly. A solution doesn't just increase capacity or improve reliability. It allows for revenue growth, increased margins, better customer satisfaction, or increased productivity. By framing initiatives in terms that matter most to your business colleagues, you can achieve what we mentioned earlier, thinking from the mindset of your peers and understanding what drives their priorities. Next, ask yourself how much of your time or how much of your great IT environment's time is spent resolving common, recurring, well-understood issues. If you find this frustrating, you're probably not alone. Most of your business colleagues probably aren't happy to wait around and have the fixes made for them. They'd rather do it themselves if it's quick and easy enough, they understand how to do it, and it would allow them to get back to their real priorities. Consider whether offering better documentation or training could empower your non-technical users in the organization to solve their own problems. Even if they prefer that IT simply do the work for them at the outset, training non-technical users to complete some tasks on their own can even help to build proficiency and have them feel like there's a greater stake in the choices that are made regarding their tools. Whether it ends up saving them time, clearing out your backlog of support tickets, or simply leading to a more balanced share of the load and a better understanding of the technical landscape, making user empowerment a priority can yield some serious dividends. Finally, for you tech professionals out there, it's important to be mindful of the fact that staff may feel particularly threatened by initiatives that automate tasks or change some of their core processes. Remember that they may fear that their jobs and livelihoods could be swept away by initiatives that IT puts in place, or they might be afraid that they'll no longer be able to competently achieve their work when faced with tools that are all new and different. In all likelihood, you'll know much more about these impacts than they do, why new tools are being selected, developed, or deployed, and what the timetable and process for the transition might look like. This is an important opportunity to communicate clearly and understandably. By sharing insight on your product roadmap, you might be able to help them understand when certain phases of a transition might take place and what changes, challenges, or disruptions users might need to expect. You have the opportunity to not just make users less frightful, but to actually win them over as advocates and champions for these changes. And that's certainly more desirable than going to battle against your colleagues who may put up resistance simply because they lack the information and can't see things from the same perspective as you can. This brings us back to the first piece of advice that can apply to anyone on either side of this divide. We should seek to understand what makes challenges critical to others. What keeps them up at night? For the business staffer, that might be not having the full picture of the company's current inventory because of a reporting system that lacks important features. For the technical staffer, that might be the fact that there's no backup system in place for a critical database. By coming together, the business leader can quickly understand the importance of budgeting for a backup system to be put in place, and the technical leader can begin working on a reporting solution that better meets the business's needs. In order to come to these kinds of understandings, as well as to resolve debates about how to best move forward, all parties should remain open to any option that might be best for the organization and its strategic goals. The business team might not want to learn a new tool or allocate the resources necessary for it to be deployed. The technical team might not want to be bound by the business team's needs and means. Using shared strategic goals, though, as a guiding light can help us to look past our own preferences and biases and remember why we're doing what we're doing in the first place and what leads us to our final point of success. Building a shared understanding of organizational goals is everyone's job. Consistently verifying that we're only taking actions that help us to meet our goals can help us to stay on track. It can help us reduce the nuisance of scope creep, help resolve conflicts between these warring factions within the organization, and ensure that we're all working in the same direction. Now, these goals can be either short-term or long-term in nature. Some of the types of short-term goals that we might seek to achieve include, of course, increasing profit or productivity, decreasing costs or defect rates, improving product quality, developing new products or services, as well as cultivating new markets for our business. Longer-term goals include those that are described by our business's mission or vision statements, strategic planning documents that might describe long-term plans for the business, as well as shareholder documentation in the case of publicly held companies. We turn to these longer-term goals in order to better understand what short-term goals we should have in mind. Based on an understanding of both these short and long-term goals, technical and business staff can come together to formulate a variety of guiding IT principles. These principles should inform the kind of technology decisions we make, based on the current and desired state of technical infrastructure, and what the business operation needs to be empowered to achieve the organizational goals in both the short and long term. Some broad examples of the kind of principles you might agree upon include all new tools prioritizing a mobile experience first, whether by smartphone or tablet, based on the fact that many of your company's staff work remotely. Support ticket responses within 24 hours might be another such goal if that's been an area of consistent pain in the past. Or the phase out of a complex legacy system in favor of new unified solutions that need to be adapted in order to better solve the organization's challenges within the next 3 years. All of our decisions and investments in the technology space should align with these agreed upon principles, whatever they might be, just as other parts of the business should consistently work toward their own strategic goals. To check this, we can ask a few questions about our technology investments to ensure that they do indeed align with these guiding IT principles. First, why are we doing this project in the first place? How does it align to what those guiding IT principles are? This should be very clear to us very quickly. Otherwise, we've not done a sufficient job in defining why that investment might be necessary. Second, how does it link to desired business outcomes and help the business to accomplish its short and long-term goals? This is a good double check to ensure that we're not just tying back to those guiding IT principles, but in fact that those principles are still aligned with our underlying long and short-term goals. Third, why are we undertaking this project now as opposed to some point in the future? Do we unlock the most value for the organization by embarking on this work right now? Or would it be better to wait maybe? Other initiatives might be more worthy of our attention right now. New technology might be on the horizon that could really radically impact the investment in question, or it might be more affordable to take action later on. It's important to ensure that it's the right solution, but also that it's the right solution at the right time. Finally, why are we doing it this way? If there are multiple ways we could have gone about solving the same organizational challenges or a challenge, what was it about this approach that made it the way to go? Were we able to achieve organizational buy-in? Will we benefit more from this approach than any other after factoring in considerations like budget, schedule, and scope? Going through this evaluation process can help ensure no solution is left in search of a problem, and that no solution has been mangled so severely by the decision-making process that it no longer ties back directly to underlying needs of the organization. In order to find the answers to questions like this, the technical and business perspectives are both critical. We can't arrive at a true answer without both perspectives, and we can't verify the plan is worth undertaking without considering the course of action from both viewpoints. So I have just a few key takeaways to leave you with today. First, how important it is to work together closely when creating plans. Close and continuous collaboration is the only way to ensure that you truly see things from each other's perspectives, that solutions will really tie back to underpinning needs, and that everyone understands the hows and whys needed to move forward. Second, use common financial and strategic terms to describe expectations, performance information, as well as success factors. This is advice more specifically for the technical folks that are joining us today, since this is likely the default case for the business folks, but it's important to use common language to ensure true agreement and buy-in. Just as business staff should strive to increase their technical awareness and language skills, technical staff should be able to effectively translate the kind of performance indicators that they look for into language that's directly relevant to their business colleagues. Third, it's up to each of you to foster stakeholder support. Creating a collaborative environment, seeking to include all of the important voices in important conversations, and working to build support through the organization is your job just as much as anyone else's. This is a be the change you want to see in the world kind of situation. And if you don't exhibit the qualities you'd like to see from others that will help you to move the business forward, you shouldn't expect it to come about naturally from anyone else. That means also working to help neutralize tribalism. It's way too easy to fall into the trap of us versus them between departments, offices, units, what have you. You are literally working on the same team when associating with others in your organization, and any efforts to drag down someone else will pull you right along with them. Now that you have a better idea of how critical business and IT alignment is for your organization's prospects, and you have an idea of how you can help to achieve that alignment, the responsibility is yours to create an environment of collaboration rather than the sort of unhealthy competition we often see. Work together with your technical and business colleagues alike in order to promote shared goals and initiatives. If you put in the time developing your guiding IT principles, you should all be on the same page regarding the direction your organization's technology should go. And you have a really valuable lens through which you can consider any future decisions. You should be able to clearly express how any new action or initiative ties back to the bigger picture. And being able to communicate that will help you to not just reduce resistance to change, but to develop new advocates for the change to take place. Finally, don't forget to continuously assess and reassess alternatives to ensure that your plans remain the best way to address the business's needs. If those plans change or if plans don't fit those needs as well as we might have thought initially, it's important to go back and make changes. In some cases, that might mean pulling the plug on a new system and going back to an old one. It might mean using a different service or vendor than initially anticipated. It might mean going in an entirely different direction than initially anticipated. It's important to remain honest and not get your heart set on any one solution, no matter how hard you might have fought for it originally, if it no longer best fits the organization's needs. Don't give in to the sunk cost fallacy, but instead seek to be pragmatic and vigilant in ensuring that a solution always remains the best way forward. Finally, if you're in a serious position of leadership within your organization, you have a particular responsibility to lead the charge in this respect. Achieving this kind of alignment is not something that will come about on its own. It requires leadership to be bought in, and for leadership to cultivate the kind of environment where everyone in the organization can move beyond turf battles and petty politics, short-sighted perspectives, and unclear visions in order to achieve something greater together. If you're able to achieve true alignment between your team's knowledge and their contributions, between these contributions and departmental priorities, and between those lower level priorities and strategic goals at a higher level, you'll be able to achieve nearly endless benefits. You can reduce costs by working together efficiently. You can increase agility and the ability to respond to opportunities thanks to quicker and more sure-footed action. You'll increase the number and quality of opportunities that you can identify by bridging the knowledge gaps that previously would have left some of your best possibilities hidden. and you can achieve strategic goals, making the effort and time worthwhile as your shared vision comes to fruition. I hope that today's conversation can help to inspire you to lead by example within your organization and to begin working to bridge that gap and to build a unified team. With that, I'm happy to continue the conversation with some of your questions. Please also feel free to reach out via Twitter or on LinkedIn if you'd like to follow up separately, or if you're watching a recording of this talk later on down the road, since it will be available there as well. And let me now check and see what questions we might have to discuss here. Just one moment, please. So we have a few really nice questions here. First off, what are some activities that could be used to achieve alignment within organizations? First and foremost, this might seem pretty simple. I have some icebreakers, some team building sort of activities, and simply meet together. You might be shocked how often I see instances where there is a very thick and strong wall communications-wise between the technical and non-technical sides of organizations. And if this sort of issue exists and there is no communication, there is no existing rapport between teams, it can only be no surprise when that lack of communication leads to issues down the road. And so, first of all, take the opportunity to try and be as inclusive as you can of both technical and non-technical stakeholders in any of the challenges that you might be facing. Make sure that they are not only invited, but actively engaged, that their opinion very clearly matters in whatever the group discussion might be, so that you can begin to understand where knowledge gaps might exist and where you can benefit from those varied perspectives. Next up, our business relies on IT to make a lot of the business rules and systems that are in place for new applications. How can we shift that role? So I think here the question might be implying that that this should shift entirely over to the business department because at present it might almost entirely reside within IT. Obviously, that raises a challenge because we're talking about things that should be mostly in the domain of the business department when it comes to the business's policies and procedures. However, I don't think that the role should be entirely shifted over to business, because how these tools might be interacted with and what the most expeditious way to achieve something still matters here. So looking back a little bit into the presentation, I mentioned how often there might be unintended side effects or consequences for certain changes being made that might seem pretty simple to a business perspective without considering the ramifications on other users or on that own, or rather on the platform's limitations itself. And so rather than trying to shift this rollover entirely, I would encourage you to, again, try to begin this conversation, take hold of more of that information. For you being on the business side of the organization, that might mean increasing your level of technical acumen in order to have a better understanding of the underlying systems that power your organization. You can gain that through some of your own knowledge and research. Honestly, some of the new executive level courses here at Pluralsight could be a really nice place to start, but also have conversations with your technical colleagues and make it clear that you're interested in understanding how your current systems work, and that will allow you to better communicate how those systems can evolve to better serve business needs. Another question here, from an IT perspective, how do you handle situations where the business is requesting items that are not aligned with the goals of the business? This is a really fascinating question, because it presumes at one level that IT knows what the goals of the business would be and that the business does not. My guess is that the business side of the organization believes that they are requesting things that are aligned with the goals of the organization. But there might be a lack of clarity or a lack of consensus between your technical and non-technical team members about where you are supposed to be going. So again, this is one of those areas where having guiding IT principles can be so valuable, because if you understand short and long-term goals and you can directly tie every action that IT takes back to these, then there won't be any sort of debate or confusion over whether or not actions that are being requested align with those goals and whether actions being taken by IT align with those goals. You end up with a very nice, strong connection between the two by taking the time jointly to work through that thought process. Another question here. It's sometimes hard to please everyone. What are some of the strategies to make sure that naysayers are engaged and feel heard? You know, the kind of person who dislikes every solution but their own. This is just as tough as it would be in any other business capacity for sure. Sometimes you will run into those more negative or cynical personalities, those who believe that they hold all of the answers and are not very receptive to the perspectives of others. And the strategies that you would employ here would be much the same as you might in those other sorts of situations. You might want to ask them how they think their policy or their suggestion might impact someone else in the organization, what the ramifications of that particular system or change might be, and help to engage their ability to think from other perspectives. Of course, if that doesn't work, you can continue to constructively try and provide them some of those answers as well, and to understand if there's some sort of underlying resistance or fear that's driving this more sort of self-centered perspective and focus on their solution being the only one that can work. Oftentimes, people get locked into that sort of perspective because they fear that something that is most critical to them either might be missed or might be changed in a way that they would perceive as negative unless we move forward with their path. And so it's entirely possible they could have a valid point that's worth accommodating, or it might be something where we can kind of assuage their fears by digging down deeper into why they might have this resistance to changes taking place. So another question here. How is it possible to overcome the internal politics through the benefits of a change? Or rather, how is it possible to overcome internal politics when the benefits of a change are clearly articulated and that change simply fails to move forward or is delayed because there's some sense of losing corporate power if that change is implemented? My guess is that this question comes from a more technically driven perspective, and that the challenge here is with someone on the business side of the organization. One particular technique or method to help overcome these sorts of concerns is to try to meet them halfway from a language perspective and understand what it is that they value and where their priorities lie, and to help them to understand why a change might be beneficial from those perspectives. So if this is a case, very classic sort of scenario might be that a manager simply doesn't want to sign off on a large new investment because it's going to really have a large burden on the budget for this year. But if they understand how it might be saving serious money down the line with a large return on investment, or it opens up our ability to better serve customers, increase our capacity, or any of those sorts of very positive business-related impacts, then you might be able to overcome some of that resistance that is currently in place. Of course, if it's a purely political question of someone personally losing their power, in most organizations, there's not a sole decision maker in a position where if they were to approve something like this, they would be very negatively and individually harmed by that. So in those cases, trying to build greater consensus in the organization, including, but also around that person for a change, if it's clearly in the organization's best interest, can also help to move things forward. Reminding everyone on a consistent basis that we should be working toward our organizational goals and not putting either ourselves or our teams first, but rather the broader mission. Question here, how to communicate with the technical team leadership when they focus more on what they can do and less on the business outcomes? So this is a great point, and it gets back to kind of this divide in where our perspectives might lie. Where oftentimes from a technical perspective, we might be really interested in what the feature set is or what the capabilities of a certain product or platform might be. And we're really driven by those sort of specifications, whether or not they directly tie back to what the business is trying to accomplish. And so this is an area where the business side of the organization can be helpful in asking and helping to redirect the conversation back to the business's priorities and technical team members should really make an effort to convert what they see and what their benefits are that they can perceive into language that can be understood from the business side of the organization. Oftentimes, we're not really talking across purposes here. The technical team is excited about a change or the specs of a particular system because they understand from a process or workload point of view what's happening and understand how that can be a benefit from that perspective. But they have a difficult time translating that into the business's understanding. So the very broad, simple example I used earlier of being able to process a much larger number of requests using a new system is a good example here, where the technical team might be really excited about that. And if they could simply convert that into the language of the business, such as being able to serve a much larger number of customers or to serve those customers more quickly, it would turn out we're actually very optimistic about the same thing. And we just have been kind of talking past each other a bit. Question here, do you see focus groups and surveys as a useful way to ensure alignment with the business among other activities? Absolutely, especially if there is a case where you can pull key leadership from a variety of technical and non-technical teams to kind of create a new workforce or a new team initiative within your organization where you have these advocates for this change to be taking place. You can kind of bring together ambassadors from each of these different departments in order to gauge what their perspectives might be, and also to have them be able to serve as communicators back to the teams that they're involved in as to what those greater organizational objectives might be. So especially in cases where we might be talking about a very large headcount, a larger organization with many departments, many teams, using focus groups, surveys, or bringing them together in a workshop environment where we can select individuals who represent those teams or departments can be a good way to get the conversation started and begin to change the culture around these sort of issues. And I think we've got time for about one more question here, probably. So let's see. How would you recommend to win our place in the table of the business's upper management as IT service providers? This is a great question. And obviously, some of this onus results, or some of this onus is also the responsibility of the business's upper management to be proactive in that regard. But one of the points I touched on earlier that I think is really important is to cover the fundamentals from an IT perspective. If the day-to-day processes that are currently in place are really humming and doing well, if business leadership does not feel like IT is an impediment to them on a daily basis, then they are oftentimes much more likely to be receptive to learning how IT can not just make their life less bad, but how IT can make their life better. And so kind of the beginning point is to really focus on those fundamentals and make sure that your level of reliability is high. But then also moving beyond that to try and meet those business leaders halfway, proactively suggesting things in terms that they can understand, talking about productivity, talking about profit, talking about increasing margin, talking about the ability to address customer concerns, improve customer satisfaction, and so on. If you can put IT initiatives in that kind of focal lens, oftentimes it's much easier for the business leader to see what that value would be. Oftentimes I feel like we see technical proposals land on the desk of business leadership, and the business doesn't really know what to do to move forward with it. And if they do eventually, it might just be because IT had asked about it for long enough, but they still might not have a real understanding of what the value of that new product or initiative or service might be. And so rather than waiting for the business side to kind of deduce what those benefits should be, we should begin that work on the technical side of the organization and then continue to collaborate with them to understand what sort of new value can be unlocked. And by doing this, we kind of naturally find a place where IT will win their place at the table alongside upper management and be coordinated in their approach of kind of building the broader business architecture. So with that, I fear we're just about out of time. If you'd like to continue the conversation, though, please do feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Any of the questions I was not able to get to, please go ahead and find me at either of those places, and I'll be happy to continue the conversation. But I'd just like to thank you again for joining me today, and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much for that excellent presentation, Casey. Now you shared so much great material today, but I just wanted to give you the chance to maybe share one final thought or takeaway with the audience before we hop off.
Sure. I mean, I really think that a lot of the problems we face come from a deficit of empathy for the other perspective. And especially when dealing with technical topics, the threshold of knowledge can be so high to understand truly at a technical level how some portions of organizations work today that it's very difficult to relate between the two. And so having a constant focus on trying to see things from the other person's perspective, whether you're on the business or the IT side of the organization, more than anything else I would share with you today, it would be that. Just try and always remember, what must it be like in their shoes? What are they thinking? What drives the perspective that I'm hearing from them right now about this subject?